At this time, I'd like to welcome Chancellor Charles Bance to the podium.
The first thing I would like to do is ask Trustee Askew to stand, a member of the Board of Trustees of Indiana University, who has spent almost all day here with us. And we thank him for his devotion to the campus and his service. We appreciate that very much. I also want to welcome all of you here on the 224th anniversary of the first election for President of the United States of America. It is astounding if you stop and think of that, how long we have been voting for presidents. And I am impressed that you are here on this day, and I hope you've already voted, since in Indiana the polls close at 6 o'clock, which is early in my world. I appreciate you coming also because I believe this is an opportunity to essentially have a look back and a look to now, and ask you to, with me and with Vice Chancellor Padar and the strategic planning team, to look into the future. Because I think we are at the point of trying to shape our campus, as you see, to 2025, and I believe beyond. And I think as you watch what I'm going to talk about today and think about the work that you and your colleagues and our students and staff and our community have done, you'll see why I'm optimistic that we will be able to define a future that is as impressive as what has happened over the last decades here in this place during these years. So I want to begin with going back to 2002. And these are some data points from the time in which I was literally interviewing for this job, because it was a confidential interview. It was held in a hotel in the Hilton at the O'Hare Airport in a really dimly lit room, I want you to know, and then followed at the Crown Plaza. And this was the campus that I was looking at that time. You'll notice we had only 2,122 baccalaureate degrees granted that year. We had, as you'll see later, significantly increased our research funding up to $202 million. Startlingly, we had only 293 beds on campus in Ball Hall in the graduate townhomes. We have today just under 4 times that, and we're going to add 560 beds next year in the hotel. So we're going to see dramatic changes. The vals and sals, for those of you who aren't in the inside, that is valedictorian and salutatorians from high schools. We only had 9 on this campus in the entering class, and we have significantly increased that to, I just looked over it, 47 in the last class. We had still 7% of our undergraduate students from the bottom of their high school class, and that has been reduced to virtually nothing. And you can see the rest of the numbers. This was one way to think about it, is what it was like in 2002. But in December of 2003, in my installation address, some of you were there, I challenged the campus to double its performance. I was playing on, of course, the idea that we are a partnership of 2 universities, but I was also challenging us to think further ahead and to do so in measurable ways. So I said, let's get a group together in the next year and figure out how to measure it. But one I stated was I believed we needed to double the number of baccalaureate degrees granted. We needed to double externally funded research. And we needed to double, by some measure, our civic engagement and double our commitment to diversity. Now, some of you have heard me say that Hoosiers are so polite that nobody told me for several years they thought I was nuts. People looked out and people applauded, although I did notice at one point when I said double externally funded research, the applause was lighter at that point, because that's an enormously difficult challenge after you've already increased it. But I did believe, as you read there, that we as collaborators, as Jack just alluded to, faculty together with administration, students together with faculty and staff, our community together, is how this has to happen. It isn't one person, it's thousands of people together, committed together. And I believe we've made a great deal of progress. In the February following that, I did my first report to the community. This is a great tradition on this campus that we actually invite community leaders to come in and learn how we are doing in the campus and in serving the community. It, of course, was held in the community because there was no place big enough to have the community in, to have lunch and see the presentation. And if you recognize some of the buildings, you'll know that it is an older photo of downtown Indianapolis, and you'll see in a moment an older photo of the campus. But we had a singular set of challenges, I believe, at that time, and that was to create the university campus for the 21st century. We had to drive forward because I came here from Detroit. I came here from the city that collapsed after 9/11, and the auto industry was collapsing around us. And smart people were having a hellacious time managing GM and Ford and Chrysler in that time. And it was clear we could not live on the economic model of the 20th century. It wasn't going to happen, no matter how smart we were. And so, from my point of view, we had to go forward and educate, innovate, have our capital be both human capital and venture resource capital, and that we had to focus on the core economic clusters of our state and our city. Although this list, as I look back on it, left out arts, culture, and tourism, because I learned, obviously, from you all that that was a key cluster here in our city. So that's where we were in 2004. We knew we had partners. These slides are literally from that presentation because Sylvia saves everything. And a year later, after the doubling committees met, we were able to describe how we would move forward on that vision, how we would work together and make this successful. And this is where these doubling goals and these specific operationalizations came from, and where we began to depend so heavily on all of the faculty and staff in order to achieve those goals. Today we stand at the edge of the plan for the 2025, and it truly is a commitment to Indiana and beyond. We have to continue to be the engine of Central Indiana. We have to contribute to the state. We have to show what we can do beyond. And as you see, I still believe collaboration is the key to our success. Now, what's amazing in this process is that if you look at the model for our campus, now there's almost nobody in here who was around in '65, but a couple of you. I won't point you out. The tall building is right behind you. That's the model for Kavanaugh Hall, and beside it, to your left, is Lecture Hall and Taylor Hall, and you see there's a fourth building, the infamous Building B, which was to be the campus center. We won the lottery. It just took 40 years. We got this building instead of that model that you see there. But even by 2004, we had already begun the transformation. In the 90s, we built a fabulous library. We built a science building. In the 2000s, we opened the apartments that you see in the upper corner there. We went to Division I, and in 2003, just as I was coming here, we got into the big dance and went to Nashville and unfortunately met Kentucky on the floor. They were 6 inches taller, every single one of them. But we played our hearts out for about 3 quarters before they just overwhelmed us. But that was part of this growth and transformation. The physical transformation since then is actually stunning. I'm always amazed when I see this list. This is what we have opened on this campus since 2003. It doesn't list the buildings under construction. We've built key research facilities. Walther is the largest research building at Indiana University. $83 million, $250,000 square feet of wet labs. Research 2, sciences, neurosciences, and cancer research. Informatics and communications technology replaced an elementary school, which is where we taught computing and informatics and other courses back then. The HITS building, a key building in our effort on translational science. Eskenazi Hall, we moved Heron from 16th Street. Many of you don't even know that Heron used to be up for 100 years nearly on 16th Street. And we moved them down. Student housing, the campus center we're in, the Simon Cancer Center across the street, the Glick Eye Institute, and key on this campus, and I'm not making a joke even though it is, parking. 3 garages in this period of time. Key developments to make this campus work. But we've done this all along with the plan, and this is from 2004 slide. We were talking about the strategic plan that we were using, the strategic goals that we had, and notice the theme of excellence, the commitment fundamentally to being an excellent institution, to providing excellent teaching and learning and research, and our civic engagement, and using, again, collaboration and diversity and best practices. This, by the way, is a nice feed-in to President McRobbie's Principles of Excellence. In 2005, the university asked us to create a new mission statement that reflected our differentiation from other campuses in Indiana University. And this mission, I've often said it was the single easiest statement like this I've ever seen written. In the faculty council, the only debate was, do you capitalize state in the reference to Indiana? Because it has the virtue of being true. We are the state's urban research campus. We are the Academic Health Science Center. We do offer a range of very distinctive bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees. We are an urban serving university, so we believe it's our job to help the citizens of the state educationally, yes, of course, but also culturally and economically. And so this mission has driven us very hard, I think, over the last 7 years. I mentioned President McRobbie articulated in 2010 the principles of excellence, which reinforce and guide us as we look at our mission and take us into the future. We want to always remember that as an urban university, we have a very specific mission. We are urban serving, not just our neighborhood, but half the people in the world live in cities, and the expectation is by 2050, it will be over 70%. Cities are a key part of the work we do in understanding all aspects of our professions and our disciplines. We are an anchor institution, as the first report talks about. We're not planning on picking up and moving and outsourcing to South Dakota, to pick a nice state, or Alabama. We're anchoring here, and we're responsible for, frankly, enormous prosperity in Indianapolis, not just because of our payroll, but because of the work that we do in the students we educate, the research that we do, the relationships with the professions that all of you have. And the report you see there from the National Research Council talks in great depth about our responsibility as a research campus to contribute to the future. And so we are both of these things simultaneously. That's why we're called an urban research university. So as we look at research and scholarship and creative activity, I want to talk rapidly about impact, what impact we've had, and I want to be somewhat provocative about our future and what kind of future and contributions we should be making. First, I want to come back to a report called the Battelle Report that was done just this last year. This is a follow-up to a report a decade ago. And in this study, This may be the best news Indianapolis has had economically in the last 5 years. An outside group taking a look at the country places Indiana as a state as one of the 5 most important economically life science states. We are on a list with some people that are virtually unassailable, Massachusetts and California, unless California completely implodes. Nobody's going to move the two of them up there. We are literally with New Jersey, which people don't realize is the pharmaceutical headquarters of the world. Not of America, of the world. North Carolina and its research triangle and the incredible work that's been done there. And Indiana, right there at number 5. This has happened in part because of the work that you all have done and our colleagues have done here on this campus, in the community, and in the state. Because it is a statewide measure. And I emphasize this at the start because, of course, life science jobs are what are called in economic development terms high-value jobs. The average salary in the life sciences is roughly twice the state's average. So these are key to the economic future, and for those of us on a life and health science campus, focus critical to the future of the state. As we talk about research, I'm again going back in the red slides, back from the early part of this century. You see the commitments we've made to try and build our research in this direction. We've created creative centers and institutes, some of which have grown dramatically. The Center for Nanoscale Imaging, a great example of work that leads and supports the life science and, of course, regenerative biology. But for those of you who don't know, one of our great centers here is the Institute for American Thought, which holds some of the most important papers that there are, certainly related to philosophy, in the world, over in the basement of a lovely building that Bill Bloomquist takes care of for us in the basement. So that we have that, and the Faith and Giving Institute, the Lake Institute, one of the most creative institutes on our campus, donated a gift that launched it, and another gift has sustained it, and it has produced some of the great provocative intellectual work of the last few years. We've also committed to creating more centers to improve our research and push to the edges, and the Signature Center process has done that. The left-hand side of that, you'll see these are centers that have done particularly well with the startup we provided in leveraging that and getting externally funded research. And once again, you see the range of life science that you expect. And here again, another one of our stellar centers in liberal arts, the Center for Religion and American Life, which consistently is funded by the Lilly Endowment. But we also see things that people often don't realize we're doing. Transportation active safety. Some of you, when you first saw this, you would have said, what in the world is that? But thanks to Mercedes and a few people running ads, you now know that cars are smart and will tell you not to pull in the right-hand lane because there's a car there. That's active safety, and our colleagues in engineering and technology are working in that kind of work. On the right-hand center, you can see some of the newest 3 that we've got. And the last one on that list is one, of course, that touches all of our hearts because we know one of the scariest things in America today is pediatric obesity. Somebody told me just this week that the highest rate of incidence of obesity by age group is 2 to 5. Now, I haven't double-checked this. This was an oral report at a conference. I was sitting next to someone. That just makes you want to cry. And so we have a center that's working on that, and we hope, frankly, that they're enormously successful. And on this day of all days, I'm certainly going to point out that a center focused on civic literacy is, in fact, an important part of an American democracy. So signature centers have been one of the ways in which we've invested and tried to drive research, scholarship, and creative activity. As I mentioned, we had quantitative measures. This is where we were When I arrived, we had rapidly moved from just about $140 million in externally funded research, which is only one measure we know of scholarship, and moved up over 250. And that doesn't count the InGen grant, which was the fabulous $105 million grant. When we announced the doubling goals formally after we had our measures, here was the projection that we had. You see the line, the good trend line. We're showing what we needed to do, and frankly, that was a pretty steep line to get up over $400 million a year in research funding. What we've done, however, is we actually hit the $400 million. We didn't quite get to 404. We got 98% above the goal where we started. But that was with stimulus money. So the last 2 years we're down in the 330s, which is still 65% above where we were. This shows both the opportunity and, frankly, the challenge in research. It is increasingly competitive to fund research. And those of you who are funded individual investigators know how just difficult this is to do these days. So this is an important measure, not, as I say, the only measure, but it is a measure of amazing progress that we've made. And I want to always thank those of you who write these grants, do the work, make it happen, who include faculty, students, and staff, obviously, on this campus. As we think about the vision for 2025, we have to think about research. It is a key part of our role as a campus. We must think about that. And I want to be provocative and encourage you to think about how can you innovate? How can you create the idea that produces the next school of philanthropy, that produces the next public health effort, that produces the next intellectual property center? What will be the driver? And frankly, that has to come from the faculty. You need to do that. We need to also focus on how we can continue to increase collaboration. It is clear that the competition for funding is going to put a premium on collaboration, both because you can leverage your assets so that if you have technology, you have equipment, you have facilities, you can leverage that, but also because funders believe in collaboration. They expect it. And so as we do that kind of work, we're more likely to be successful. The other thing it does is it raises ambition. One of the things I learned from astronomers many years ago and learned from my friends who were geologists of Mars. All right? I knew a man who was a geologist on Mars. You have to be a person of enormous collaborative skill to be an astronomer, but to be a geologist on Mars? Nobody gets to do that by themselves. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, decades of work, collaborative across the world in many of these cases, and you work together to get to an instrument on Mars digging dirt today. That's what collaboration does, is it also raises your expectations of what you could do. And I ask you to think about that. Similarly, I ask you to continue to think about translating research to practice. One of the assets this campus has that is in rare supply in this country is a fundamental commitment to take your work into the community and use it, to translate it to practice. And yet, I look around this room alone, and I know faces that I know do that exact work. And yes, it's sometimes obvious the social workers are going to do that, but it's not always obvious that the anthropologist over here is going to apply it to dental work and then put it in another context. And I could do that around the room. That's one of our assets. Again, it's collaborative. Again, it's innovative, and it translates into practice and distinguishes us as a campus, and that, I believe, will help shape the future. So I ask you to think about what is the next thing. is that you've already got it in your lab, you've got it in your classroom, and we need to drive it in terms of research. In my discipline, it happens to be health communication. It's not that new, but it's something we're building. We've got a PhD before the Commission on Higher Education. This will be an opportunity that this campus can do in a way other campuses can't. I am convinced by my colleagues in liberal arts that religion is going to continue to be one of those. I believe this country has people who support the study of religion academically, and I believe there are great people who study it, and so it's an opportunity there. But those are just two examples I happen to know. It's our responsibility to encourage you to come up with those. So as you think about Vision 2025 in this area, push yourself and your colleagues to hear what are those ideas of the future. Because as Jack Windsor said, if we're going to be successful, we have to listen and act on those ideas. Some won't work. Some we hit the lottery with. And there are those examples in our past. Let me move on to teaching and learning and talk about its impact and its future and how critical it is and where we've also come from. I want to start by talking about something that is not an IUPUI thing, even though I'm the convener of this group. It is called the Talent Alliance. It's a voluntary group of leaders in our community who are committed to the idea of student success from cradle through career. In our world, we're very concerned about that career end of it. After high school, college, graduate, professional, and into careers, and when they come back, we're focused on that. But there are people in this very room who are experts in prenatal care, or experts in pre-K education, or focus on K-12 in some way, or think about teenage health in some way. We know that student success, life success, is an ongoing process, literally from birth through their careers. And this group is looking at that success and putting out an annual report. The third one will be out this year, which looks at how many of our children are ready for kindergarten, how are they doing in third grade, eighth grade, high school, and into college, and completion, of course, of college. That framework we need to keep in mind. Even if I don't do all that work, it needs to be on our mind because we're part of the community that depends on that whole pipeline through cradle through career. One of the things that in my career I would have never bet on, was that when I challenged the campus to double baccalaureate degrees, never did I think that the President of the United States would think it's a great idea. President Obama wants us to be, again in this country, to be the most educated adult population. We're not. And the President wants that. The Lumina Foundation, which happens to be based here in Indianapolis, it's the leading higher education foundation in this country, is committed to a goal called the Big Goal 2025. And that goal is that 60% of adults have high quality degrees and certifications by 2025. You need to know we're not quite 30% away from that. It is a huge goal, but it says completion matters. It says education post-secondary matters, and they are huge champions of this, which fits with us. Our own Commission on Higher Education has adopted that goal you see above for 10,000. We voluntarily are partnering in those other two, the Talent Dividend and the ASCU and APLU project completion. Those are efforts for completion, and why do we do that? Because I want you to know in 2005 I showed this chart, and it was sad. Today it's tragic. This is after the recession. If you want to guarantee that the future of a person is not what we want it to be, tell them not to go to college. If you look at the chart on unemployment, the salmon color part of that chart, until you get an associate degree, you are above average in unemployment. And if you have less than high school, you are tragically unemployed. 14% with the national average at 7.6. And you should know it gets worse. Most of the jobs lost in this recession were high school and below jobs. So this is, in fact, a huge problem in this country. And if you look at the other side, who has above the median weekly income? College degrees and above. So when somebody tells you you don't need to go to college, I'm here to tell you, if you're talking about the entire U.S. population, that is simply a lie. I didn't say a misstatement. That's a lie if you're talking about the whole population. If you're talking about an individual, remember I used to do data, you can't take the data to an individual. And everybody says at this moment, Bill Gates. All right? Now, Bill Gates is astonishing. But remember where Bill Gates dropped out from. And if you don't remember, it's Harvard. The guy got into Harvard. Oops. Nobody gets into Harvard who isn't going to be able to finish, okay? That's the deal. 2, I read a little bit about his past. His parents were, of course, overeducated, well off, and, by the way, trained and encouraged this incredibly talented young man to learn an enormous amount as a very young person. Now, are you willing to tell someone to bet their future on that piece of data? I'm not. I'm a law of large numbers kind of guy. And the law of large numbers, which is the entire U.S. population, says this is a very bad idea. There will be exceptions, but do not let someone before you say college doesn't matter. Will it change, do differ during a recession, yada, 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 all is possible. But we know in this recession who got hammered. Look at the employment rate of people with education. I sure as heck am glad that I'm a doctoral degree. So, that's why completion matters. Now, one of the things we've done here, and you've done it, is create degrees that I call 21st century degrees because they are typically interdisciplinary, they typically tie to economic clusters, they are new and innovative, and frankly, they appeal to students. What a strange idea, okay? And every one of these has been created in this century, every single one of them. The ones that are blue are tied to the economic clusters, predominantly our strengths in Indianapolis, and the ones that are black are health and life science. Gee, do you catch up focus here? So what we've done, I believe, is create degrees that focus on the interest of our community and the needs of our community, and I believe that has helped us create things. Now, some of you have heard me say one of my favorites, motorsports, because motorsports engineering. I have dinner one night in Bloomington, and the woman at the table is from Benton or someplace. She looks exceedingly young. She loves school. She couldn't think of anything bad. I always ask, what do you like, what do you don't like? Her mother said parking on the don't like. And I said, so what do you really like? She said, I just loved it. They let me actually get my hands on a car in the first semester. And I'm thinking, total gearhead, all right? Well, I go home and I ask the honors people to tell me about her. Let's just say her grade point's higher than mine was in high school by a good bunch. She was a drum major, over 4.0, had a scholarship, did all this stuff, applied one place because we had that degree. Talented student chooses to come because we created something that fits interest and actually fits the economy we happen to live in. And oh, by the way, she's now doing an internship with one of the companies that work on cars here, that industry that we have. So one of the things you've done is build these things. And as we think again about the future, what are those things that we need to look at that will help us be successful? One of the hard pieces of work that's been done here, and this has been done by all of you who work with students, is improve our graduation and retention rates. You don't need to be a whiz at statistics to notice that if you draw a line through every one of these curves, they're up and right. Positive slope, all in the right direction. Are they all perfectly up and right? No. Would we want them to be? Yes. We're not done here. We got more work to do. But for example, barely 5% of our students 10 years ago finished in 4 years. We've tripled it. Is that enough? Nope. But we need to keep working at this, and we need to celebrate that we have made progress. So one of the things people, frankly, were sort of saying when I came is some people said, can we really get this student body to finish? That would be a yes. And it happened because people worked with students to make them successful, including referring some who shouldn't have come here to Ivy Tech, but also then trying to bring them back and help them be successful. This is the doubling degrees goal. Here was the chart we showed in 2005 about what we needed to do. The one at the very top was our total degrees. We quit putting that on the chart because it made it messy. Here's what we've done. We are up over 1,700 degrees. So last year, there are 1,700 students with bachelor's degrees who finished more than 10 years earlier. So you have changed their lives forever. And as I tell people in the community all the time, this is really hard work. You think it's hard to study for one test? Remember, we're talking about people who are taking 3, 4, and 5, and 6 years to finish their degrees. How hard is it to help them to be successful? Since they are, after all, human beings with their own will and issues and families and all of those complications. But we have done that, and frankly, we need to keep doing that to help support the big goal. This was a chart that surprised me. We've not used this one before. We have dramatically increased our graduation rate of our minority students from 474 to over 800, roughly 80% increase in the last 10 years. We have doubled the number of our international students. This is both undergraduate and graduate students on this campus. These both together are critical because we know the students of today and the future are going to be increasingly diverse and increasingly international. And so we need to have those students and be successful with them. Here's another new one. I asked the question, how many of our students live downtown? Well, it turned out, no big surprise, there were only roughly 1,000 back in 2005. We're up to 1,836. We're about to add 560 on campus next year. Trinitas is going to build another 200 apartments up Indiana Avenue at the 1201 site, up Indiana Avenue. They're going to build a Cosmopolitan #2 in downtown. We will see this number continue to go up. Now, why do I emphasize that? One is, we are not just anymore, as everyone said, you are just a commuter campus, which you need to know was a personal offense to somebody who has 2 degrees from one of the largest commuter campuses in America. I took that personally occasionally, but tried not to show it. It isn't just the University of Minnesota, I'm sorry, and it's not just IUPUI. We are creating a community here, and we are an anchor of that community. So I've got deans who live downtown, 2 of them in this room. We've got people who are moving into the community, and that will change the life of this campus in many, many different ways. As we talk about students, I wanted very much to bring in President McRobbie's remarks at the State of the University address. If you did not see that, I actually encourage you to read it. It was a long and very thorough analysis, and this is one of its most telling points. Every source of revenue that we have as universities is under pressure. Tuition, there's pressure to keep any increase from coming along at all. The state support we don't expect to increase. We know there's pressure on research funding. Medical reimbursement for those of you who practice is under pressure, and we expect that to change across time. And finally, philanthropy, which is a key thing on this campus, has grown dramatically, but are we going to be able to backfill all of those other 4? Not likely. And so we need to be very efficient and effective in using the resources we have and build that into our thinking for the future. I think that is a key part of what we need to do. So as we think about 2025, I think there are lessons in where we've been successful that are really important for us. We know we can improve graduation rates. We know we're going to need to find new strategies. We'll know we'll need to adapt to new students. But we have made enormous progress in doing that. And at the same time, we need to think about several things. And let me just give you about 5 of them quickly. As I just said, we are going to have cost revenue pressures. We're caught between that pressure that President McRobbie talked about. That is going to be there. So are there some ways we can actually use technology to save money, not cost more? That's always been the nut. Everybody knew technology was useful in education, but no one was very able to scale it. Well, with massively open courses, you can scale it, but you go broke because you don't have any business model there. So we're going to have to think about that, and Dr. Padar is working and sees that as one of the things that needs to be pushed in this area. But you can bring your expertise to that. What other online strategies can we use? Secondly, changing demographics. Driving in yesterday, I heard this on the radio, and thanks, Sylvia, for getting this. And I'll just read you this. Paul Taylor at the Pew Research Center, for one, has been taking a very long view. Well, the very long view. And it quotes him. One way to think about America is that we are in the mid-passage of a big, century-long demographic change, Taylor says. We are steadily moving towards the day when minorities will be the majority. In 1950, the country was 85% white. Taylor says the number will dip below 50% by 2050. A dramatic fundamental change. Now, why is that so important? We know that many of those members of that community go to college at a lower rate. The data are clear on Latinos going to college at a lower rate. We know that African Americans attend and are successful at a lower rate. So we, in planning for 2025, have to plan to be more successful with the students we know we need to have. And they will be more diverse than we've even had here on a campus that, in fact, matches the population area in terms of test-taking students on campus. So that is a key part of it. Another third item is, as I mentioned, we are going to have more students on campus and in downtown. We will have a different feel here, I believe, the minute we convert the hotel. Because those 560 students are not going to be dispersed across the campus. They're going to be heavily concentrated in the center of the campus. And you'll notice them, even more than you have in the last 2 years when you saw them walking up and down the street. That will have an impact. We know there'll be an impact of them living in the neighborhood as they stay here and live in these other apartments. A fourth item that has puzzled me, and I'm throwing this one out, I don't have this solution, is oftentimes as we've gone to online, I've had people say to me, well, let's not make them pay for all the services that they get on campus. And it always makes me queasy, not just because I'm cheap, but partly that. But partly, I keep asking myself, has anybody asked them what they need? What do we need to provide to our students who are online, and whatever that means? They might be our students in the hotel online. They might be students in Afghanistan online. How do we think about providing support? For example, one of our most important services here is counseling CAPS. You don't refer somebody to CAPS casually. It's not like saying drop by the library and get a Coke. People are referred to CAPS because there's a need. What do we do with a student who we find out online has need of counseling services? We're going to have to think about that if we scale this kind of work. That's just one example of ways that we can push. And finally, in this area, this is the one that I think is the secret and is the hard one. As faculty, I am convinced you provide astonishingly added value in some of your interactions working with students. I mean, it's amazing to me sometimes to listen to a faculty member talk about working through with somebody how to do a project. And it doesn't matter how smart the person is, because I happen to know somebody who teaches really smart postgraduate students, but they don't know what she can teach them. Or worse, often, they don't even know they don't know something they need to do their project. You do that. So how do we think of faculty in this next 15 years is focusing more time on the stuff that adds huge value to learning? And frankly, we find a way to reduce the stuff that doesn't. I know you'd feel terrible if you didn't have to do some of the mundane housework of your job. But if we could get rid of some of that and allow you to spend time as a fellowship, mentorship relationship, that would add value. And so as I'm asking you, thinking about this, how can you most add value and be most successful is, I think, the key that I'm trying to suggest there. Civic engagement, the third leg of our campus, is the easiest to talk about because you should know I've gotten over my modesty from South Dakota, Minnesota, and living here. I even have gene pool that came from Indiana. I've gotten over it. I walk into rooms now and just say, you should know that this is the research campus that is the most successful civically engaged campus in this country. And people look at me like he's making this up. You know the slides, you know the reason, you know the awards. You do it. We need to think and celebrate what we've done, and going towards 2025, we also need to think about how do we do this again and continue to lead the country, and I would argue the world, in illustrating this kind of work. We, in the doubling goals, picked a quantitative measure because we tried to do that on all of these things we could, and we picked service learning courses because it was so concrete. And it's frankly ridiculously successful. I'll show you in a second, but we use usually the 2003 data simply because it's easy for me to say it was 2,000 students instead of 1889, which happened to be the year South Dakota joined the Union, so I might have remembered that one. This is what we did, though. This is what you did by creating service learning classes. This is the number of students enrolled in credit-bearing classes. We went from 2,000 to 8,400, almost 8,500 for credit. And for those of you who are not mathematically inclined, that means that 40% of our undergraduate students in a single year registered. Now, I know they could be duplicated, but if you just do it as an average, 40%. And as I always put the footnote down, that does not count Mike's Bachelor of Social Work students who are doing clinical placements. It doesn't count Marion Broom's and nursing students, undergraduates who are doing clinical placements. It doesn't count anybody in education who's doing it as part of their student teaching. That's in addition to this. So when I say we're world leaders, I don't think I'm exaggerating on this one. And this is one of the great achievements because faculty had to create all these courses and grade them all and work with students who are out in the community doing service learning. That's hard work. But it is a great example of how we translate our research into practice. So if you think about the vision for civic engagement for the future, I think what we need to do is ask ourselves, how can we make an even greater contribution? And I think of several ways I want to suggest just briefly. One is there's a national awareness that we need to do more to improve students' community and civic engagement for democracy. We have to. It's our responsibility in higher education to make a contribution to that. And clearly this is one of the ways we're in a position to do that. Similarly, we know that on a campus where so many of you do your work tying to the community, or your colleagues do, this is a place where we can envision moving further forward, whether it is, as a physician said, one of our chancellor's professors, he said, you need to understand that the future of medicine is the hospital will be the intensive care unit. It will not be for anything else. Nobody will go for a day. They will be there because they are so sick they cannot be anywhere else. And healthcare will be delivered in clinics all around our community, which, by the way, is going to make our life in education extraordinarily complicated, because that means you're going to put nurses and physicians and social workers all over these clinics, because you can't just send them across the street. Because all they'll see across the street is transplants at the IU hospital. That's their focus at the hospital there. That won't tell them anything about other kinds of care. So that is an example of where we're going to see a fundamental change, I think, in how we do civic engagement related to our disciplines. We have got the recognition, I told you I'd remind you of this, and I just leave this up just because that way you can say it to somebody else. We have now been on the honor roll, you should know, for the President's Award 5 times. The very first year we won the Presidential Award, and we were a finalist this year. We did not make it to the top 3, but we were a finalist again. It's astounding what the work you all have done, because every year we have to submit another example of our engagement in the community that you all do. And that's what we've been using to make this case. I'm using that also as a transition to talk about development, fundraising. Now, why am I doing that? I'm doing that because one of the secrets of this campus is we believe our partnership with the community is two-way. We learn from them, they learn from us, we support them, and they do support us. So how is it that a campus that was told in the 1997 that it could not raise $300 million, raised so much money they changed the goal from 500 to 700 the day it was announced in public, and as most of you know, ended at $1.39 billion, $0.39 billion. And the answer, I believe, is because our community, our foundations, believed that we were their partners, that we were engaged with this community. And most of the big gifts were literally partnership-type gifts. So that NGen grant of $105 million was clearly a partnership to try and help develop the genomics initiative here for the entire community, not just for one unit or one campus, but for the entire community. That kind of partnership has been critical to our fundraising success. And so we're now in the second campaign. Its goal is $1.25 billion. While I cannot tell you the number, I can tell you we're going to make the goal. And I believe we've done that because we focused on these themes that tied so clearly with our community. People want students to succeed. We know that. We know that there's a fundamental need for health and life science here, and that's seen as a partnership in this community in many, many ways. We know that they value us as an urban campus and take pride in our work and appreciate the work that you bring from whichever discipline it is. And, of course, championing civic engagement has been the theme of what I just talked about. But what also has been interesting in this campaign is transformational impact of our gifts. These gifts, whether huge or small, or modest, or however you want to describe it, have fundamentally changed things here. And this is one of those lists that I like to look at because you think, has anything changed? Once in a while I do this, you know. Occasionally we all have slow days at the office and you say, has anything gotten done? This is one of the lists I like to use. The Cox Scholars Program is the single largest gift for scholarships ever to Indiana University. We have access to 1/3 of those resources, which is over $26 million. The total gift was over $90 million. $26 million of endowed support for students is stunning on our campus. That's just a stunning gift and opportunity. It is changing lives. And what is wonderful is Jesse Cox was alive to see the first of our students who were Cox Scholars. Beulah, unfortunately, was not. The Indiana Physician Scientist effort, the initiative, that's another Lilly gift, the endowment gift, but it's for translational research, for MD, PhD types to do research and translate it into practice. The Simon Cancer Center, you all know the incredible gift they gave to fund research and support the building. The Glick Eye Institute literally did not exist before Marilyn Glick said to the chair of ophthalmology, what would it take to build the world's best eye institute? And fortunately, Linda Cantor and Lou knew the answer. $30 million. And we have a building that didn't exist. We have an institute that didn't exist and a fund for research. This truly transformed what is a modest-sized department, if talented, but it wasn't like it was a 100-person department, and changed it forever. The Fairbanks School of Public Health, we didn't have a School of Public Health. We now have a School of Public Health. We have it named and with an endowment that's being built up. And this state needs that kind of support. The Vera Bradley Foundation has been so generous in supporting our breast cancer efforts. And at the bottom here, I put the RISE scholarships because this has been one of our great finds in this campaign. As you know, it's a $20,000 gift. We match it $500 of the income. It's for students who are doing research in international service and experiential learning. But for example, Heron, which is again a modest size, if exceedingly talented group of people, have 13 of those. Or they have 10 and philanthropy has 13. So we have a brand new school that opened the doors with 13 undergraduate scholarships from this campaign. And by the way, there are others all across the campus. This is transforming students' lives because we know those experiences will make a difference. And I always like to point out Bob McKinney because we had that wonderful event last month of naming it. And for those of us who were privileged to see him twice on these occasions, but this time with his, all 5 children were there. Bob is so pleased that he was able to align his goals with Gary's and the school's goals to make a difference and get much better. And Bob is not shy about saying that's what he wanted. So they have 5 endowed chairs that they had none, and there will be roughly $17 million in scholarship support. This is a transformational gift that a donor did because he watched the work that you and our predecessors have done on this campus and saw us get better. Excellence matters because people notice it. So as we think about this and we think about the future, one of the things for us to remember is doing great work is the secret of getting support. Collaborate, partner, work with your community, but always do great work. Because people respect that. And frankly, it makes an amazing difference. So I was startled when Sylvia pulled this out of my remarks 9 years ago. And I have to say, I was right. I didn't imagine we'd get this far. I couldn't have ever imagined this building, even though I'd seen a model of it by this, 9 years ago. I couldn't imagine that. And think of what we've covered in this time together. And think of what you can imagine and then go beyond about the next decades. Because that's how we got here. The reason it is so good to talk about this today is our predecessors had the guts to push and think for the future. And I think that's where the vision is for 2025. Push each other, push us to think about what that vision should be. So I appreciate your time, but most of all, I appreciate the work you do. There is nothing, as I always say, when I review this stuff, looking at this that doesn't make me proud of the incredible work that people do on this campus. And I include everybody from custodians through the students, through the staff, for the person who made this thing work this afternoon for me, for my colleagues who've done so much to make this campus what it is today. But our responsibility is to do it again for the people who follow behind us. So thank you very much.